Thank you.
So, Isabella, after a film like that, I don't need to introduce you. Everybody knows you intimately. You have made New York City your home, and that seems to be almost uncannily poised between Hollywood and Europe in terms of distance.
I think it's geographically and mentally the perfect place between Hollywood and Europe. It's true.
And you've made, if you look at your filmography, you've made actually quite a lot of films, but the ones we remember are very selective. And how many do you get scripts every day from Europe, every day from Hollywood, or do you tell your agent not to?
Yes, 2 or 3 a day. No, actually, as you grow older, there is less and less script. But I don't even have an agent anymore. And I don't think they want to represent me because they feel that it's very difficult to work with an actress when he's older. And probably the role that they might find for me, I may not be very interested, which might be to be a guest on television series or sitcoms. This is generally what actors do, or some actresses continue on the theater. There is a longer life in the theater than television, than on the screen, on feature films. But I tried the theater, and it's a little hard. I think partially because English is not my primary language, and theater is so based on voice and nuances. So I've always been easier for me, photography and imagery, because I think I can command that, I can understand it. And even when I became a filmmaker and make my own film, like Green Porno, I think the visual component is stronger. Just because words, I've always had to also talk and make a little dance to make sure that my point came across, because my language, though I'm fluent in English and in French and Italian, but none of them have become finally my language.
But those films, Green Porno and Seduce Me, are playing at the Natural History Museum in London right now.
I know, this is incredible. My little series called Green Porno became quite successful on the internet and went all the way. Now he's at the Museum of Natural History in London with Darwin. It just opened a week ago. Yes.
Did you go back to your father's documentaries before you made those films? Did you?
Oh, no, not at all. Later people said, oh, you are realizing one of your father's dream. My father, if he had lived longer, he died at 71, he was interested in making films about science, but not strict documentaries, but his way of making documentaries, sort of neorealism of science. But he died. He was actually in Houston figuring out in Houston because NASA was there and was working with Rice University, but he could never make his next project of making scientific film. But when I was a little girl, it was my father who gave me a book by a German called Konrad Lorenz, who was the founder of a new science on animal behavior. And that book was a revelation for me, you know, and I always carried it throughout my life. And I know that my passion and my interest is on animals and animal behavior. I never knew how to get to that, making films or becoming a veterinarian or somebody like Jane Goodall. But finally, later in my life, I've found that I can make film about it, which was something I dreamed when I was little, and my father gave me the book. He knew that I loved animals, and so he thought that was something that I would love, and he was right.
Now, when you were growing up with him, did he talk about films? Did he show you films?
No, strange enough, he didn't want us children to see films. We grew up with an incredible tension in the family because my mother was chased out of the United States. So my father became incredibly resentful toward Hollywood and commercialism in film. And I think he was much clearer than today what is a commercial film versus an artistic film. Nowadays, independent films are also done by the studios, and television exists that is commercial, but maybe sometimes it's public television, so it's more serious, so it's harder to make the demarcation. But he was completely against commercial films, and so he didn't want us, didn't talk to us. The only one person he talked to me was Charlie Chaplin. And he actually had a photo of Charlie Chaplin on his desk, signed, dedicated to my father, which was unusual. He never had any photos of anybody in the cinema.
That's interesting.
Yeah.
So there's a direct line, Chaplin, Rossellini, Godard.
Yes, yes.
Did Godard ever offer you a role?
No, Godard didn't offer me a role, but I went with Gero to meet him for this documentary, and I know he's quite a recluse. Yeah. So we went with great trepidation, and he was, first of all, I was surprised that he is in his 80s, because he looked exactly like, the French 68th revolutionary. Yeah, yeah. It's the same look, the same, he doesn't age one bit. And I was delighted because throughout the interview and in between the shot, he would take my cheeks and do that, something that hasn't been done to me in so long. But he saw me as the daughter of, which I hated when I was young. Yeah. And now as an older lady to have that, and I was so delighted.
Two of your most memorable roles have been for David Lynch, your former husband. His films have been mystified people, and very few people can claim to understand a David Lynch film completely from start to finish. When he was creating them and when you were married to him, did he discuss scripts with you? Did he show you, discuss your part in detail, or did he just let you go with the flow?
He's not very verbal. He's not able to articulate things very much, but he reacts to things you do a lot. So as you say, David, do you want me to walk like this? He makes a face, so and that's not the way to go. Oh, but you want me to walk like this? Yeah. And then he has so he really directs you, and you sort of little by little, but it's not through a verbal exercise, but he definitely knows what he wants. And when we did Blue Velvet, when it came out, it was very controversial. And mostly because of the nudity, the violence, the ambiguity of the film, which was horrible, tense, sadomasochism, mystery, narrative, not completely straight. But David doesn't like straight narrative. You don't have to understand his film. He doesn't want you to understand. Because he says, and he's right, he says, do you understand life? He has a point. So he wants to capture that. Yeah.
And as does Peter Greenaway, another director you've worked with, in Tulslooper Suitcases.
Yes. I don't even think the film was shown, but I really loved working with Peter Greenaway. I think the most eccentric filmmaker, besides Guy Maddin, who is here in the audience, with whom we have collaborated a lot, is Peter Greenaway, David Lynch.
Both interested in art, too, in painting.
Very interested in art, very interesting. Yes, especially Peter Greenaway. Because I think David's inspiration is the mysterious. He also is very much into meditation. So I think he's very much into understanding things beyond our normal five senses. He feels atmospheres, and the film translates. Peter, I think, has an incredible understanding of painting, and his films come from paintings and what he sees in paintings. And in fact, I would like to go to a museum with him, and wouldn't it be great to go with Peter Greenaway to a museum and have him comment on what he sees?
Well, often he does during the Venice Festival. He will do he will create some painting or recreate various versions of it.
I saw this latest one that he had done on Leonardo da Vinci on The Last Supper.
Yes.
He came to New York. Wonderful. I love the same thing with Guy. They don't limit themselves to filmmaking, not because it's a limit. Maybe it's the first love, his film, but Guy is interested on mixing theater and film. That there is no boundaries. That always that what you want to express or what you want to create can blur all the boundaries that are generally created by commercial obligations. You know, this is a film, it'll be 2 hours long.
Yes.
We would do 5 screenings a day. We'll distribute it. This is the theater.
Yes.
You know, all that, and it's a limitation for
Yes.
artists. So the one that are able to just invent something using all these things that influence our life, whether it's theater, painting, television, imagery, sound, music. But it takes an original mind to mix it all together.
And
And
Guy
then also
certainly
the
has an
endless
original
amount.
mind.
Oh, Guy does. But there is a tremendous amount of problems always finding money,
Yeah.
which I seen when I was a little girl. So now I see with David, with Peter Greenaway, with Guy. And instead of terrifying me, I found it delightful.
Yeah.
I find it to be a very familiar problem that makes me feel completely at home.
And you were here with Brand Upon the Brain a year or two ago, and I think you've just finished a film with Guy. Do you want to tell us about it, or the one that's in
But
post-production?
you know, yes, I'll tell you. But I tell you that I don't understand Guy's film until I see them done. So I just do Guy's film. There is a script. Generally, I can't He asks me to read it, and I read it, but I don't really understand it. But it doesn't matter, you know. Sometimes you're just a piece in a big orchestra, and you have to play your fiddle, and then you hear the music at the end. And that's the way I see it. It doesn't matter. I mean, I'm not going to select saying, Guy, well, let me read the script. I'll tell you if I can play that role. If he thinks I can play it, I'll play it. If I do something wrong, he tells me. He said, don't do that. I'll do something else.
And in a way, you're attracted to enigmatic characters. I mean, when you were in Berlin here, you made the film The Innocent with John Schlesinger.
Yes.
And your character, Maria, is rather mysterious. I mean, are you attracted, when you see a script, do you go for those kinds
I think I'm attracted to original minds, because when you're an interpreter, you have to sort of take a trip like a tourist in somebody else's mind. And if the mind is interesting, it's a wonderful trip.
Yes.
But you have to make yourself available to be at the service of that mind. I do my own films, you know, so I express, I don't feel any frustration or not expressing what I want to express. But when I make somebody else's film, unless you're a very conventional actor in a conventional film, you know, so sometimes they are routine that you do, you know, you have the subtext and you have, you rehearse and everything has to have a logic. But sometimes that works most of the time, but with some directors, it doesn't work. It doesn't make any sense to use that logic.
You made green porno and Seduced Me, I assume, in New York or in Europe?
No, I made them in New York. I filmed them in a studio in Brooklyn, and Sundance is financing me, the big company by Robert Redford.
Yeah.
He's a wonderful man, and he has supported me, but supported a lot of Redford too in his own way, though he is so known as a Hollywood superstar who made the best Hollywood big films, and yet he's very, very determined for diversity in film. So he thinks it's very important to have independent artistic film, not as a fight toward studio, but just as, otherwise he's afraid that the voices will be narrowing it down to a trickle, that you have to experiment because it's the voice and the diversity that will bring, that will keep the industry alive. So he's very committed to that American way of everybody has a voice. It's important that individualism is expressed. It's very, very American philosophy, and it very much represents that.
But your father probably would have approved of that too.
Oh, yes, I think my father would have adored Robert Redford. As a man, I don't think that as his beauty or sex symbol, I think he would have said, don't go see that film. But as a man, he would have loved him, yes, definitely.
And have you been tempted to make similar films in Europe? Have you had offers to actually make films for Italian television, for example?
Yes. Strangely enough, I haven't worked much in Italy. And I don't know why. I think that partially is that films are not only made nationally, but they are made with your friends. And the fact that I lived in New York created my own friends in America. And so I ended up working with David Lynch and then Friends of David, or Guy probably thought of me after seeing Blue Velvet, and so hired me in his film. Now we have collaborated in several films. So, and I think I came out of that circle. I did one film. I only did 2 Italian films, in my entire career, and I played a very small role in a film that came out this year, The Solitude of Prime Numbers. And I have now made this year 2 French films. One with a very interesting, 2 interesting film director, both women. One is Julie Gavras, Costa Gavras' daughter. Yeah. And I'm delighted to be working with a second generation. We had lots to say about how difficult or how easy it is. And then with Marjan Satrapi, who is an Iranian filmmaker who works in Paris, that did a very famous Persepolis.
Yeah, wonderful. Yeah, she was here. She's been here.
Yes. Yes. Because she lived in Berlin too.
Yes.
Yes. And we shot the film in Berlin, so I was here this summer too.
And was it difficult to, have you ever had, as an actress, obviously no problems in Hollywood, but in terms of trying to get a feature film off the ground, as a woman, did you ever encounter this rather macho attitude towards female directors?
I don't think I really had a Hollywood career, because I can't think of any Hollywood studio films that I've done, but maybe 1 or 2. I think I started late. As an actress, I became an actress in my 30s, and so by the time you need about 7, 8 years to establish. By then, I was too old for Hollywood. I already was 40, so that was it. And I had an accent, and though some accents are accepted, now we have Penelope Cruz, who has a big career, but still I think is a Spanish accent, and America has a second language, Spanish. I don't know still how open it is. I wondered, that would be one of the questions that I would have liked to ask my mother if it was alive, was the Hollywood that she was when she went in the late 30s, a Hollywood that was more open to European, as they were escaping Europe during the war. And was it more, I think it was somewhat more open then. They spoke that funny language they called Mid-Atlantic, that was no British, no American, look at Cary Grant, that language. And the audience accepted that. Nowadays, the audience, they want to have an accent that is authentic, that comes from a neighborhood or a city. Otherwise, they say, what is it? But then the Hollywood Mid-Atlantic is an accepted language. It didn't exist.
She had the most successful career of any European actress, I think, who came to Hollywood at that time. Yes. But she really was immediately accepted. And I suppose Hitchcock helped a lot, and then films like Gaslight, and there were films during the war which were big successes. Yes. Until she fell in love with your father, she was a top box office star. And Casablanca is probably the single most popular Hollywood film of all time, and she's in it.
Yes, and that incredible stellar career that she had was only built in 9-10 years that she was in Hollywood. It's an incredible career, and she's also mostly remembered for those films, though she has worked with Ingmar Bergman, and there is a retrospective of Ingmar Bergman, and the film that she's done with my mom called Autumn Sonata, and then she made many films in Europe with Renoir, with my father's, but I think she's mostly remembered for the Hollywood films.
Yes. Well, we always like to open it up for questions, because I'm sure many people want to ask you. We have a limited time schedule. We also have a system here, if anyone's coming for the first time, of microphones. Please wait for a mic to reach you, otherwise your voice will not be recorded forever. And who's going to ask the first question? We have people on either side with mics. So anybody wants to ask the first question to Isabella Rossellini? I can't see. I'm looking up. Anyone jump in? Any questions? Any answers? No. There's someone right at the back by the camera there. Can we get a mic to the back of the hall, please? Okay. Have you got one? They're right by the camera in the middle. That's right.
Hello.
Hi.
I admire a lot your career. Still, I want to ask you if you have any regrets in your life. I don't know, in your acting career, in your achievements.
Yes. There are regrets. I mean, one is right now, for example, I am president of the jury, and I've been asked to be in juries before, and I said, no, I have to be with my children because I have 2 children, and I would not go to festival or juries until my children are grown up. And because already I was traveling so much as an actress or as a model, I didn't want to leave them for another 2 weeks, which is very long for children. And I'm learning so much. I didn't realize that being in the jury is the best school, you know. I should have done it because I would have been a better filmmaker or even a better actress. But I didn't know that there was this aspect of learning that I'm experiencing these days. So I should have gone to accepted more film juries. There are regrets. I think the biggest one is always this tension between family and work, which I think is a torment for every woman that works. I have a feeling that though our generation was able to enter into the men's world, you know, we have as many doctors, women as men, or as many lawyers. Probably filmmakers are entering now. You know, this year I work with Guy, but I think he was the only man. Everybody else was a woman filmmaker. So it's, you know, becoming, but I don't think that the women's world has entered into the business world. There is still no acceptance of the children, the expectation that you work, that you finished your job, that you are working extra hours. And the school doesn't understand it either. You know, every time there is a meeting at school, is at 3:30. I mean, if you work, how can you leave at 3:30 to go to your children's school? So that world has to, I think women integrated in the men's world, but it's the men's world that has to integrate it in the traditional women's world. That's the next step, because that has been the biggest conflict. We have the same problem.
Another question? There's over there, I have a lady in 2 rows from the back, with her hand up. Can we get a mic to her?
Hello.
Yes.
I have 2 questions.
Yes.
One very short, and the second one is it could be long. First of all, did you ever write something like a diary?
No, I don't. I sometimes try to write a diary, and then I forget about it. And I found one the other day of a period, and it was actually useful. I thought, oh, interesting. And it was funny, too. I thought, oh, because I went there to destroy it. I went there to clean it, and I said, I better destroy. I'm getting old. I don't want people to find letters or diaries or something that I don't want to go public. But actually, it was kind of very funny, and so I kept it. But no, generally, I write, but I don't write a diary.
And that was my second question. Do you write, and are you thinking about maybe writing and directing something by your own in the next few years?
Yes, the first film that I wrote was My Dad is 100 Years Old, but a guy directed it. Because I thought that he would marry so well. Guy makes this black and white film. They look like silent movie. They look like they're going to disintegrate. This is the last screening of their film. You know, they look like... And I thought that he would marry very well with the feeling I wanted to express of death and the fact that my father's films were forgotten and he was forgotten and how anxious I was about it. And so it was the first collaboration where I wrote and interpreted. I was an actress in the film, but Guy directed it. And actually it's Guy that gave me the courage to direct myself and his producer, Jody Shapiro, because they make things very simple. I was very intimidated about crews. And you have a crew where there is 100 people, big men, lots of men, and you have to tell them what to do. And, you know, I'm always told that be a good girl, obey. So I didn't know how to take that role of a director. But when I saw their crews that are made sometimes of 10 people, friends, everybody collaborating, any mistake is laughed and is remedies. There is the lightness, and that gave me the key to become a director. It was the lightness of the production, something that I can handle. And then that's what gave me the courage to make Green Porno. And now I directed a 45 minutes film called Animals Distract Me. And I am writing new scripts, so I am writing and directing.
And you've done this film, Late Bloomers, which is playing at the end of the festival.
At the end of the
Can
festival...
you tell us about that so we all
Yes,
go and
this
see
is
it?
Julie Gavra's film. She wrote and directed. This is a second film. She did a wonderful film called Blame It on Fidel. It was her first film. And now she made this second film called Late Bloomers, and I'm playing with William Hurt. Yeah. And it's going to be shown in the next weekend at the Berlinale. Good. And it's I just played, it's a straightforward acting job that I was hired, but I was delighted to, it was the first time in many years that I played lead. You know, I hadn't played lead in a long time. And somewhat it's easier to play lead than smaller parts, because a lead, you have a much easier way to create an arch for your character. Sometimes when you have a small role, you have very, very few beats to create a complete persona that you have to interpret, and you really have to hit it right. But when you have the lead, and you say, oh, I played that scene so heavy, but my character has to have sense of humor. So maybe you have another scene where you can play that other aspect. So there's many ways to give a lot of facet. But when you play a supporting role, you have lesser scenes, so you have to be more precise. You have very, very precise stroke. Yes. So somehow it's harder. Plus, you're very shy. You know, you're coming into a crew who has maybe worked together for 3 months. They are like family, and you might be there for 4 or 5 days.
And you never know when you're going to appear in the film.
And you never know. And sometimes cut the part. You go see the film, right. No you.
That's right. Another question? I have somebody in the fourth row. Yeah. All right, okay, somebody's already beat you to it. Right? Okay. Go ahead.
Okay. Often we have images of a movie we keep in our mind all the life. There is one movie with your mother, a few words, who made history. In German, the words are, schau mir in die Augen, Kleines. In English, it was a little bit different. Did you talk with your mother often about those words?
Well, I don't know what they were in English, because I don't speak German.
Look in my eyes. I don't know.
Is it Casablanca?
Which film was it?
Casablanca, yes, of course.
Here he's looking at you, kid.
Here he's looking at you, yeah.
Here's looking, from Casablanca.
From Casablanca. Okay. My mother was very surprised. She went to see, once she was asked to go to Harvard University, and they show Casablanca, and she went to see she wanted to see how Casablanca would affect the young people. You know, she might have gone in the 70s or 80s, but it was 30, 40 years after the film. And she was completely surprised because the audience recited the lines like a little bit Rocky Horror Show, you know, that happening. So she didn't know how to react to it. She was very surprised because Casablanca, I think, was rediscovered after the war in the late 60s, 70s, a revival of Humphrey Bogart and his trench coat and his cigarette and his way of talking. And so the young people loved that character, and they looked at Casablanca as a happening, you know, where they would answer back to the screen.
And Play It Again, Sam.
And
Woody
Play It
Allen
Again, Sam, and round out the usual suspect and all this famous line. No, so she was completely taken back, and she didn't know how to read it. You know, was it good or was it bad? And she was also surprised that Casablanca, which was very successful when it came out, became such a memorable film. You know, when the Library of Congress decided to extend to cinema and select films that were going to be kept as a preserved as an expression of American culture. The first one was Gone with the Wind, and the second one, or maybe was Citizen Kane, but the second one was Casablanca, right. And she was so honored and so surprised, you know. I mean, I think Humphrey Bogart was the only American. I mean, even the director was an American, wasn't he an Hungarian? So it was all this.
That's right. Yes, she was Hungarian originally.
But she was delighted, but sometimes I think both my father and my mother, they had, you know, my father had Open City and my mother had Casablanca, and they were delighted, but sometimes they felt also that my father felt that the neorealistic film were very successful at the beginning of his career, and everybody was nostalgic of that cinema, and he could not experiment and go on because people were disappointed. They wanted him to do that film. And the same thing for my mom. You know, sometimes she felt, I always have to do a sort of very romantic Casablanca, otherwise people are disappointed. So sometimes they felt that, I mean, you know, 80% they were honored and delighted, and 20% they felt, sometimes this success, it gives you a little, yes, you know, a barrier, yes.
Well, we have time for one more question, side matter of lottery, actually.
One more question from the nosebleeding seats, maybe.
Oh, yes, yes.
Are there any films on this festival that you already liked a good deal?
How can you want me to say it?
No,
I am the
you're the one
president
thing
of
she
the
can't
jury.
say.
I cannot say it.
Yeah, well,
I only seen 7 films out of the 16 that we have to judge, so I cannot say it.
okay, then what did you learn from them? Because you said it's a good learning.
You know, I think it was an incredible, the director of the festival chose film. I really appreciated all of them. They have an incredible integrity. They're done by great artists, and each one has a very strong, different style. So you can't say, you know, I like a film that is, you know, entertaining, I understand the story, because he has that, but he has other things, he has so many styles, it's almost going into a museum and going to abstract art, expressionism, impressionism, surrealism, an example of all. So it's so enriching, and I'm loving the experience. I also think that seeing 2 or 3 films a day and not doing anything else, and this is my principal responsibility, and I've asked not to do interviews or go to parties so that I can really concentrate on film, allows you to look at them with complete different eyes. You see so much in that, so much, you dedicate so much attention that when you buy the ticket and you sit and you have a day on your shoulders that make you in a good mood or tired, and you expect a film to relax you or maybe doesn't and you don't like it, when you're like this, you know, it's like a tabula rasa. I sit there and say, okay, talk to me. I love this experience.
Isabella, we know that in addition to seeing films, you have meetings to talk about the films.
Yes, this is also very interesting.
And this, I know, you have to go. So,
Yes.
so unfortunately, we have to bring this to a close. But you've been wonderful to make the trek here. We appreciate it, and I'm sure everyone
Thank
will
you so
remember
much.
this evening.
Thank
for a
you
long
so
time.
much.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Second one is, it could be long. First of all, did you ever write something like a diary?
No, I don't. I sometimes try to write a diary, and then I forget about it. And I found one the other day of a period, and it was actually useful. I thought, oh, interesting. And it was funny, too. I thought, oh, because I went there to destroy it. I went there to clean it, and I said, I better destroy. I'm getting old. I don't want people to find letters or diaries or something that I don't want to go public. But actually, it was kind of very funny, and so I kept it. But no, generally, I write, but I don't write a diary.
And that was my second question. Do you write, and are you thinking about maybe writing and directing something by your own in the next few years?
Yes, the first film that I wrote was My Dad is 100 Years Old, but a guy directed it. Because I thought that he would marry so well. Guy makes this black and white film. They look like silent movie. They look like they're going to disintegrate. This is the last screening of their film. You know, they look like... And I thought that he would marry very well with the feeling I wanted to express of death and the fact that my father's films were forgotten and he was forgotten and how anxious I was about it. And so it was the first collaboration where I wrote and interpreted. I was an actress in the film, but Guy directed it. And actually it's Guy that gave me the courage to direct myself and his producer, Jody Shapiro, because they make things very simple. I was very intimidated about crews. And you have a crew where there is 100 people, big men, lots of men, and you have to tell them what to do. And, you know, I'm always told that be a good girl, obey. So I didn't know how to take that role of a director. But when I saw their crews that are made sometimes of 10 people, friends, everybody collaborating, any mistake is laughed and is remedies. There is the lightness, and that gave me the key to become a director. It was the lightness of the production, something that I can handle. And then that's what gave me the courage to make Green Porno. And now I directed a 45 minutes film called Animals Distract Me. And I am writing new scripts, so I am writing and directing.
And you've done this film, Late Bloomers, which is playing at the end of the festival.
At the end of the festival...
Can you tell us about that so
yes,
we all go and
this
see
is
it?
Julie Gavra's film. She wrote and directed. This is a second film. She did a wonderful film called Blame It on Fidel. It was her first film. And now she made this second film called Late Bloomers, and I'm playing with William Hurt. Yeah. And it's going to be shown in the next weekend. He has a point. So he wants to capture that. Yeah.
And as does Peter Greenaway, another director you've worked with, in Tulslooper Suitcases.
Yes. I don't even think the film was shown, but I really loved working with Peter Greenaway. I think the most eccentric filmmaker, besides Guy Maddin, who is here in the audience, with whom we have collaborated a lot, is Peter Greenaway, David Lynch.
Both interested in art, too, in painting.
Very interested in art. Very interesting. Yes, especially Peter Greenaway. Because David, I think David's inspiration is the mysterious. He also is very much into meditation. So I think he's very much into understanding things beyond our normal five senses. He feels atmospheres, and the film translates. Peter, I think, has an incredible understanding of painting. Yes. And his films come from paintings and what he sees in paintings. And in fact, I would like to go to a museum with him, you know, and wouldn't it be great to go with Peter Greenaway to a museum and have him comment on what he sees?
Well, often he does during the Venice Festival. He will do some. So he will create some painting or recreate various versions of it.
I saw this latest one that he had done on Leonardo da Vinci on The Last Supper. Yes. He came to New York. Wonderful. I love the same thing with Guy. They don't limit themselves to filmmaking. Not because it's a limit. Maybe it's the first love, his film, but, you know, Guy is interested on mixing theater and film, that there is no boundaries, you know, that always, that what you want to express or what you want to create can blur all the boundaries that are generally created by commercial obligations. You know, this is a film, it'll be 2 hours long, we would do 5 screenings a day, we'll distribute it, this is the theater, you know, and it's a limitation for artists. So the one that are able to just invent something using all these things that influence our life, whether it's theater, painting, television, imagery, sound, music, but it takes an original mind to mix it all together.
And Guy certainly has an original mind.
Oh, Guy does. But there is a tremendous amount of problems always finding money, which I seen when I was a little girl. So now I see with David, with Peter Greenaway, with Guy, And instead of terrifying me, I found it delightful.
Yeah.
I find it to be a very familiar problem that makes me feel completely at home.
And you were here with Brand Upon the Brain a year or two ago. What's the first question to Isabella Rossellini? I can't see, I'm looking up. Everyone jump in. Any questions, any answers? No. There's someone right at the back by the camera there. Can we get a mic to the back of the hall, please? Okay. Have you got one? They're right by the camera in the middle, that's right.
Hello.
Hi.
I admire a lot your career. Still, I want to ask you if you have any regrets in your life. I don't know, in your acting career, in your achievements.
Yes. There are regrets. I mean, one is right now, for example, I am president of the jury, and I've been asked to be in juries before, and I said, no, I have to be with my children because I have 2 children, and I would not go to festival or juries until my children are grown up. And because already I was traveling so much as an actress or as a model, I didn't want to leave them for another 2 weeks, which is very long for children. And I'm learning so much. I didn't realize that being in the jury is the best school, you know. I should have done it because I would have been a better filmmaker or even a better actress. But I didn't know that there was this aspect of learning that I'm experiencing these days. So I should have gone to accepted more film juries. There are regrets. I think the biggest one is always this tension between family and work, which I think is a torment for every woman that works. I have a feeling that though our generation was able to enter into the men's world, you know, we have as many doctors, women as men, or as many lawyers. Probably filmmakers are entering now. You know, this year I work with Guy, but I think he was the only man. Everybody else was a woman filmmaker. So it's, you know, becoming, but I don't think that the women's world has entered into the business world. There is still no acceptance of the children, the expectation that you work, that you finished your job, that you are working extra hours. And the school doesn't understand it either. You know, every time there is a meeting at school, it's at 3:30. I mean, if you work, how can you leave at 3:30 to go to your children's school? So that world has to, I think women integrated in the men's world, but it's the men's world that has to integrate it in the traditional women's world. That's the next step, because that has been the biggest conflict. It was the first time in many years that I played lead. You know, I hadn't played lead in a long time. And somewhat it's easier to play lead than smaller parts, because a lead, you have a much easier way to create an arch for your character. Sometimes when you have a small role, you have very, very few beats to create a complete persona that you have to interpret, and you really have to hit it right. But when you have the lead and you say, oh, I played that scene so heavy, but my character has to have sense of humor. So you maybe have another scene where you can play that other aspect. So there's many ways to give a lot of facet. But when you play a supporting role, you have lesser scenes, so you have to be more precise. You have very, very precise stroke. So somehow it's harder. Plus, you're very shy. You know, you're coming into a crew who has maybe worked together for 3 months. They are like family, and you might be there for 4 or 5 days.
And you never know when you're going to appear in the film.
And you never know, and sometimes cut the part. You go see the film,
right.
no you.
That's right. Another question? I have somebody in the 4th row here. All right, okay, somebody's already beat you to it. Right? Okay. Go ahead.
Okay. Often we have images of a movie we keep in our mind all the life. There is one movie with your mother, a few words, who made history. In German, the words are, schau mir in die Augen, Kleines. In English, it was a little bit different. Did you talk with your mother often about those words?
Well, I don't know what they were in English because I don't speak German.
Look in my eyes. I don't know.
Is it Casablanca?
Which film was it?
Casablanca, yes, of course.
Here he's looking at you, kid.
Here is looking at you, yeah.
Here's from Casablanca.
Casablanca. My mother was very surprised. She went to see, once she was asked to go to Harvard University, and they show Casablanca, and she went to see she wanted to see how Casablanca would affect the young people. You know, she might have gone in the 70s or 80s, but it was 30, 40 years after the film. And she was completely surprised because the audience recited the lines like a little bit Rocky Horror Show, you know, that happening. So she didn't know how to react to it. She was very surprised because Casablanca, I think, was rediscovered after the war in the late 60s, 70s, a revival of Humphrey Bogart and his trench coat and his cigarette and his way of talking. And so the young people loved that character, and they looked at Casablanca as a happening, you know, where they would answer back to the screen.
And play it against.
I mean, if you work, how can you leave at 3:30 to go to your children's school? So that world has to, I think women integrated in the men's world, but it's the men's world that has to integrate it in the traditional women's world. That's the next step, because that has been the biggest conflict. We have the same problem.
Another question? There's over there, I have a lady in 2 rows from the back, with her hand up. Can we get a mic to her?
Hello.
Yes.
I have 2 questions.
Yes.
One very short, and the second one is it could be long. First of all, did you ever write something like a diary?
No, I don't. I sometimes try to write a diary, and then I forget about it. And I found one the other day of a period, and it was actually useful. I thought, oh, interesting. And it was funny, too. I thought, oh, because I went there to destroy it. I went there to clean it, and I said, I better destroy. I'm getting old. I don't want people to find letters or diaries or something that I don't want to go public. But actually, it was kind of very funny, and so I kept it. But no, generally, I write, but I don't write a diary.
And that was my second question. Do you write, and are you thinking about maybe writing and directing something by your own in the next few years?
Yes, the first film that I wrote was My Dad is 100 Years Old, but a guy directed it. Because I thought that he would marry so well. Guy makes this black and white film. They look like silent movie. They look like they're going to disintegrate. This is the last screening of their film. You know, they look like... And I thought that he would marry very well with the feeling I wanted to express of death and the fact that my father's film were forgotten and he was forgotten and how anxious I was about it. And so it was the first collaboration where I wrote and interpreted. I was an actress in the film, but Guy directed it. And actually it's Guy that gave me the courage to direct myself and his producer, Jody Shapiro, because they make things very simple. I was very intimidated about crews. And you have a crew where there is 100 people, big men, lots of men, and you have to tell them what to do. And, you know, I'm always told that be a good girl, obey. So I didn't know how to take that role of a director. But when I saw their crews, that are made sometimes of 10 people, friends, everybody collaborating, any mistake is laughed and is remedies. There is the lightness, and that gave me the key to become a director. It was the lightness of the production, something that I can handle. And then that's what gave me the courage to make Green Point. Working with a second generation, we had lots to say about how difficult or how easy it is. And then with Marjan Satrapi, who is an Iranian filmmaker who works in Paris, that did a very famous Persepolis.
Yeah, wonderful. Yeah, she was here. She's been here. Yeah.
Yes. Yes. Because she lived in Berlin too.
Yes.
Yes. And we shot the film in Berlin, so I was here this summer too.
And was it difficult to, have you ever had, as an actress, obviously no problems in Hollywood, but in terms of trying to get a feature film off the ground, as a woman, did you ever encounter this rather macho attitude towards female directors?
I don't think I really had a Hollywood career, you know, because can't think of any Hollywood studio films that I've done, but maybe one or two. I think I started late.
Yes.
As an actress, I became an actress in my 30s, and so by the time, you need about 7, 8 years to establish. By then I was too old for Hollywood. I already was 40, so that was it. And I had an accent, and though some accents are accepted, now we have Penelope Cruz who has a big career, but still I think is a Spanish accent, and America has a second language, Spanish. I don't know still how open it is. I wondered, that would be one of the questions that I would have liked to ask my mother if it was alive, was the Hollywood that she was when she went in the late 30s, a Hollywood that was more open to European, as they were escaping Europe during the war. And was it more, I think it was somewhat more open then. They spoke that funny language they called mid-Atlantic, that was no British, no American, look at Cary Grant, that language. And the audience accepted that. Nowadays, the audience, they want to have an accent that is authentic, that comes from a neighborhood or a city. Otherwise, they say, what is it? But then the Hollywood mid-Atlantic is an accepted language. It didn't exist.
She had the most successful career of any European actress, I think, who came to Hollywood at that time.
Yes.
But she really was immediately accepted, and I suppose Hitchcock helped a lot, and then films like Gaslight, and there were films during the war which were big successes.
Yes.
Until she fell in love with your father, she was a top box office star, and Casablanca is probably the single most popular Hollywood film of all time, and she's in it.
Yes, and that incredible stellar career that she had was only built in 9-10 years that she was in Hollywood. It's an incredible career, and she's also mostly remembered for those films, though she has worked with Ingmar Bergman, and there is a retrospective of Ingmar Bergman, and the film that she's done with my mom called Autumn Sonata.
Hello.
Hi.
I admire a lot your career. Still, I want to ask you if you have any regrets in your life. I don't know, in your acting career, in your achievements.
Yes. There are regrets. I mean, one is right now, for example, I am president of the jury, and I've been asked to be in juries before, and I said, no, I have to be with my children because I have 2 children, and I would not go to festival or juries until my children are grown up. And because already I was traveling so much as an actress or as a model, I didn't want to leave them for another 2 weeks, which is very long for children. And I'm learning so much. I didn't realize that being in the jury is the best school, I should have done it because I would have been a better filmmaker or even a better actress. But I didn't know that there was this aspect of learning that I'm experiencing these days. So I should have gone to accepted more film juries. There are regrets. I think the biggest one is always this tension between family and work, which I think is a torment for every woman that works. I have a feeling that though our generation was able to enter into the men's world, we have as many doctors, women as men, or as many lawyers. Probably filmmakers are entering now. This year I work with Guy, but I think he was the only man. Everybody else was a woman filmmaker. So it's, becoming, but I don't think that the women's world has entered into the business world. There is still no acceptance of the children, the expectation that you work, that you finished your job, that you are working extra hours. And the school doesn't understand it either. Every time there is a meeting at school, is at 3:30. I mean, if you work, how can you leave at 3:30 to go to your children's school? So that world has to, I think women integrated in the men's world, but it's the men's world that has to integrate it in the traditional women's world. That's the next step, because that has been the biggest conflict. We have the same problem.
Another question? There's over there, I have a lady in 2 rows from the back, with her hand up. Can we get a mic to her?
Hello.
Yes.
I have two questions.
Yes.
One very short, and the second one is it could be long. First of all, did you ever write something like a diary?
No, I don't. I sometimes try to write a diary, and then I forget about it. Was it good or was it bad? And she was also surprised that Casablanca, which was very successful when it came out, became such a memorable film. You know, when the Library of Congress decided to extend to cinema and select films that were going to be kept as a preserved as an expression of American culture. The first one was Gone with the Wind, and the second one, or maybe was Citizen Kane, I thought, but the second one was Casablanca,
right.
and she
That's
was
true.
so honored and so surprised, you know. I mean, I think Humphrey Bogart was the only American. I mean, even the director was an American, wasn't he, an Hungarian? So it
Yes.
was all this.
That's right. Yes, she was Hungarian
Yes.
originally.
But she
Michael
was
Curtiz.
delighted, but sometimes I think both my father and my mother, they had, you know, my father had Open City and my mother had Casablanca, and they were delighted, but sometimes they felt also that my father felt that the neorealistic film were very successful at the beginning of his career, and everybody was nostalgic of that cinema, and he could not experiment and go on because people were disappointed. They wanted him to do that film, and the same thing for my mom. You know, sometimes she felt, I always have to do a sort of very romantic Casablanca, otherwise people are disappointed. So sometimes they felt that, I mean, you know, 80% they were honored and delighted, and 20% they felt, sometimes this success, it gives you a little, yes, you know, a barrier, yes.
Well, we have time for one more question, side matter of lottery, actually.
One more
Who's-
question from
one
the
more.
nosebleeding seats. Maybe.
Yes, yes.
Are there any films on this festival that you already liked a good deal?
How can you want me to say it?
No,
I am the
you are the one
president
thing
of
she
the
can't
jury.
say.
I cannot say it.
Yeah, well,
I only seen 7 films out of the 16 that we have to judge, so I cannot say it.
okay. Then what did you learn from them? Because you said it's a good learning.
You know, I think it was an incredible. The director of the festival chose film. I really appreciated all of them. They have an incredible integrity. They are done by great artists, and each one has a very strong, different style. So you can't say, you know, I like a film that is, you know, entertaining, I understand the story, because he has that, but he has other things, he has so many styles, it's almost going into a museum and going to abstract art, expressionism, impressionism, surrealism,